Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. Today I'm doing a fight-by-fight breakdown for Abyss of Legends Path 1. I will have paths 2 through 5 coming out, hopefully over the next few days, but I think for convenience of researching purposes, I wanted to separate it path by path, so there will be some crossover information between the paths fight by fight, but I'll break it down every time. Before I start, I use this map here on the right side of your screen. This has the nodes and the information for all of the fights, as well as lays out the paths. It's a pretty common tool that everybody uses in order to do their Abyss of Legends runs. I will have a link to the map itself, as well as the Reddit post where I get the map myself. They're public information, but this is for simplicity's sake if you just want to click the link and check it out in the description. There will also be a link to my spreadsheet in the description. Pretty much everything I say in this video is just written on the spreadsheet. I'll touch in a little more details, but for the most part I got it all here on the spreadsheet. So if you're a reader instead of a listener, go ahead and pop over and give it a read instead. That said, let's dive right in. So as far as the spreadsheet is concerned, I have it laid out with nodes, essentially node mechanics or things you have to think about, common attackers for that champion, whether or not I think you should boost, whether or not there are any special mastery consideration, and then playstyle notes for anything you need to change in the way you play, either mechanically or with skill or patience, etc., depending on how the nodes and the champions stack up. So first off, we have Thing. Thing does not have any Abyss of Legends nodes. It is literally just a 2.7 million health Thing. Sounds simple, but that's a lot of health for a Thing. Next up, common attackers, Aegon, Hitmonkey, Sabretooth, Void, Ghost. Pretty much anybody can do a Thing fight. You can just fight him the same way. These are just like the common ones you'll see videos for. I think you should boost for this fight unless you're ramping up Aegon or Sabretooth, because it is pretty much a waste of a boost. You really want to get the most out of your ramp up as possible, but once they're ramped up, then you can boost and punch things down. Mastery considerations, you don't have to worry about anything here. For playstyle notes, this is a standard thing, so standard mechanics for Thing, but specifically if you're using Aegon, the less confident you are in fighting against Thing, the more important it is that you quit out and save your combo. The sooner you do it, essentially. A lot of people set a metric like 100. Once I hit 100 hits of quitting the fight, doesn't matter. Some people are like, nah, I'm gonna go until I die. Doesn't matter if I bank combo. That's what I did, because there's a lot of other fights to bank combo down the line. Really up to you, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever way you'd like to do the fight. Just keep in mind you have that 15 rock stack requirement. And with Aegon, there are multiple ways to do this. The first one is my method, which is a 6-hit parry heavy. This allows you to frequently knock Thing down, hopefully resetting that AI profile and keeping them aggressive. There's also the second method, which is 5-hit combos where you end on a light. This allows you to do 5-hit combos, so it's just 3 combos, and then you have to bait a special. It's also very, very simple. And then finally, the 6-hit, 3-hit combo, or just flexible comboing, where you just adjust to however the fight is going, depends on how you like it. Do keep in mind though that Thing as a defender here isn't the Abyss. All the Abyss defenders across the board are like really wonky because of the Abyss node and rage. Sometimes they're defensive, sometimes they're crazy aggressive, and there's really no real metric that I can see as a player. It's just kind of how the node is. It's supposed to make them more erratic and tougher to fight. Additionally, the only real thing you can guarantee is that when the rage timer is ticking, then they go aggressive. So if you absolutely know that you don't want to get backed into a corner against Thing and you've got him at 15 rock stacks, just keep parrying and stalling, because once the rage timer goes, he's very, very likely to launch his special. Next up is if you're using Sabretooth, make sure you don't bank the Fury from the 10 hits. So essentially every time you hit 10 hits with Sabretooth, you get a Fury. Don't bank that. It's a weak Fury. You only want to bank the special 3 Fury. You can do this by essentially getting to a combo of 10, waiting for the Fury from that to fall off, and then launch the special 3 and quit out. I think you can get up to like 6 or 7 Furies naturally just launching L3. So once you've got all of those, you can only retain them by quitting out of the fight. So that'll be your method for saving that big SP3 Fury. If you're using Void, you're living up the slow play. Damage over time is really your major damage source for this Thing fight. Next up is Omega Red. For Omega Red, let's see if we can't pull this over just a little bit. Beautiful. For Omega Red, as far as node mechanic goes, there is every time you critically hit him, it increases his power rate. Additionally, he gains scaling number of Furies every time he special attacks from, gaining bars of power. So it's not too bad. You can literally use anyone to take this Omega Red down. I would recommend you use boosts here just because it's pretty much just a punching bag Omega Red. There are no major mastery considerations, and as far as playing against him, you want to bait a special one or bring a robot, and don't take blocked hits when you're trying to bait the SP1. It's going to be a lot of chip damage. At first, it's not going to be so bad, but by the time he's throwing his 12th or 13th SP1, he's going to have a lot of Furies stacked up, and it's going to really, really hurt if you take it into the block, so do be mindful of that as well. For Quake, as far as node considerations go, you only have to worry about, she essentially has this like earthquake meter that charges to 100 over time. Every time you critically hit and every time you bleed her, this meter reduces. So as long as you have a champion with like a above average crit rate, you're not really too concerned, or if you have a bleeder, even better. You can literally use anyone, but she is better to take down with a crit or bleed champion. I would recommend you use boosts here, because again, this is pretty much just a punching bag. Precision mastery really helps here, but you should have that active anyways. This is a standard Quake defender mechanic, so if you know about the aftershock charges and utilizing specials when they're about to expire so you don't get stunned, that's really important. You don't want to block her specials because that'll place aftershock charges on you. You don't want to accidentally bait heavies because she'll evade. Standard Quake mechanics. Next up is Medusa. So Medusa has every 30 seconds gain a 15-second unstoppable buff. Nullifying a buff on Medusa resets the timer. This is the standard cosmic node for Abyss of Legends. Pretty much all the cosmics have this. I think all the cosmics have this actually. But as far as champions, it is easier to take her down if you have an anti-auto block or you're bringing a Mystic with the Nullify ability, but generally speaking, this Medusa can be taken down with any champion. I would recommend you boost here because it's mostly a punching bag. No major mastery considerations, maybe Mystic Dispersion. I guess I should add a note. Maybe Mystic Dispersion. Because if you're using a Mystic champion to take her down, that will help give you the benefit. But that's a pretty standard for any Mystic champion. If you're not using a Mystic champion, then I recommend that you just parry 2-hit when the unstoppable triggers. It's really not that bad. I personally opted to use Aegon over Doom for this Medusa just because Aegon's able to get more damage per hit. So as long as you just parry 2-hit her when the unstoppable is there and then back off, you can time out the unstoppable, and it gives you a 15-second free punching bag reign and a 15-second just kind of stalling reign. There's not a lot of block damage from her, so you can really, really get to the hit counter as long as you play the fight properly, and you don't have to worry too much about being backed into the corner because you're constantly parrying. Next up is Mephisto. For his node, every 10 buffs that expire / are nullified on the attacker, he places a 15-second Fate Steal debuff on the attacker. If this is removed early, it deals 100% of the defender's attack as direct damage. So just for reference, as far as Mephisto goes, we are... My mouse won't show up behind the thing. Oh well, we are pretty far on the map. As far as Mephisto goes, though, you do want to bring an Incinerate Immune, typically Torch or Void, but specifically, do not use Aegon here. Like, very specifically, if you're not bringing an Incinerate Immune, don't use Aegon. Because if you use Aegon, every time you shrug that Fate Steal debuff, you are going to get completely shredded on your health. Essentially, I would only boost for this fight if you're not using Torch. If you're using Torch, you're going to get so many Spolders that it really doesn't matter. You can maybe pop health and champ boost just to be safe, but honestly, with the class advantage here and given Mephisto's pretty low damage output, you don't have to worry too much about the extra damage. Even from parrying and blocking, it's a really, really easy fight as long as you have your pre-fight, and if you don't have your pre-fight, you just keep reviving until you get it. So for Torch specifically, it's an easy one-shot with the pre-fight. You can block his special one for Smolders, proximity while his Aura of Incineration is up gives you Smolders, but if you don't have your pre-fight, then you are relying on the L3 to get a damage phase. So essentially, you do your standard parry L3, and then you can attack into Mephisto and place Nova Flames instead, and this will help you get your damage off on him from the Smolders that you were building up anyways. Just be careful because your Incinerates, when you don't have pre-fight, will give Mephisto passive power gain. You just got to make sure you're on top of your special baiting game. But if you're doing that, then you'll find a couple of L3s, and you could actually even one-shot this guy without using the pre-fight. But if you're bringing Torch in, try and make sure you have him awakened or save your pre-fight for this fight. For Brie Larson, Captain Marvel movie, while the attacker has greater than 1.5 bars of power, the attacker takes energy damage over time every 15 seconds. Both champions gain a 10-second 1.5 bar power flood. So essentially, you need to stay below 1.5 bars of power, and you're constantly gaining power every 15 seconds, kind of like Hyperion method. As far as common champions here, Doom or Mystics with energy damage. Doom isn't the only option anymore because any Mystic champion can really just shred her, but ideally you want a Mystic with energy basic attacks. They do a lot better. I would recommend using health and champion boosts here just to really help with the forced, fun and interactive damage you're taking and mitigating that. I would recommend not running recoil because it's going to be a lot of special usage in this fight, and that's going to hurt. But generally, if you're using a Mystic with energy damage, your damage is coming from Captain Marvel movie gaining binary charges from a Mystic. She takes passive direct damage or direct damage every time she gains a binary charge from an energy attack from a Mystic, or just from a Mystic in general. So for this fight, you really just focus on staying below 1.5 bars of power so that you're not passively dying to fun and interactive damage, and you just watch as CMM burns herself to death. If you're using a Mystic without energy damage, you want to hit into her block. This will also trigger binary charges on her and will do a ton of direct damage. So you don't necessarily need to have energy damage on your Mystic. It's just ideal. For Ghost, she has what is considered the tech node, which is Defender has a permanent armor off. If it's removed, it returns on a 15-second cooldown after the armor break expires. While Defender has an armor up, they gain a charge when struck. At 10 charges, they steal the attacker's power. All tech champions with this buff or node are immune to ability accuracy reduction and nullify while they have armor up. As far as Ghost, though, you can use anyone to take her down. I would recommend you boost because she's just a punching bag, no major mastery considerations. As far as playstyle, just mind the charges. This is pretty much a free fight as long as you don't push her to an L3. For Iron Man Infinity War game, well, let me roll one. Come on. For Iron Man Infinity War, he has the same nodes as Ghost, but he's actually significantly harder as a result of it, just because of his kit. As far as champions people use for this fight, Aegon, Void, Torch, I would recommend you boost. It is a frustrating fight, potentially. No major mastery considerations. If you're using Aegon, at this point you should have true accuracy or unblockable auto attacks, so you don't have to worry too much about the auto block, but do mind the charges, because as long as you mind those, this is pretty much just a standard punch fight. The last 15% can be quite problematic, but it's not too much trouble if you have 999 charge, because you can literally just punch into Iron Man Infinity War, not worry about the auto block, and just hopefully pound him down. If you're using Void, Slow and Steady is the name of this game. Ideally, you have Petrifies or Fear of the Void active for the last 15%. This will really help you deal with the power gain, because that's kind of the major issue, is that last 15%, the Abyss armor up does count for gaining armor. Makes Iron Man Infinity War a major pain. And if you're using Torch, if you're trying to get a one-shot, you want to use boosts, and especially use health and champion boosts. Attack boost will help as well. What you're going to do is parry the 2 shots from the SP1, because they're pretty much low chip damage. You don't have to worry too much about it, but you're going to dex any SP2 you trigger on Iron Man Infinity War, because the parry damage there is massive. The goal is to have as many smolders as possible when you have the last 15% of Iron Man Infinity War, because essentially you just want 1 or 2 Nova Flames to tick him down while you're stuck in the corner dexing specials for all eternity. And if you do that properly, you can get a sweet one shot on Iron Man Infinity War. Joe Fixit. Every 10 seconds, Joe gains a buff or the attacker gains a debuff. All special 3s remove Joe's buffs gained this way, and heavies purify all debuffs on the attacker gained this way. Joe Fixit is immune to Nullify and Fate Seal debuffs. You can use anyone to take down Joe Fixit. I would recommend you boost up because this is a pain of a fight. Limber could potentially really help you for the tip I'm going to give you in a moment, and maybe Willpower if you're not using heavy to shrug off the debuffs. If Joe Fixit starts with Healing Factor, that's the buff he gains at the start, and you don't want to just quit out, tank a heavy attack. You could just quit out and then revive and go back in. say you got bad RNG, but you could also just hold block and tank a heavy attack. This will reset his buff, so you could potentially get some damage out. If you're bad luck, he'll go health, and then he'll go health again, which kind of sucks. But pending the potential for Abyss stun, you might, not get stunned. You'll get back up, and then you'll be able to punch into Joe. He'll only have gained like 40,000, maybe 60,000 HP, and you just have to beat that threshold to get something out of that current revive. Additionally, you want to bait special 2s to avoid chip damage, but honestly, even the L1 chip damage is not too bad. For Mordo, every 10 buffs that expire / are nullified on the attacker, place a 15-second Fate Seal debuff on the attacker. If this is removed early, it deals 100% of the defender's attack as direct damage. We've seen this before on Mephisto. Don't use Aegon. Otherwise, common attackers are Torch or Void, but technically speaking, you can use anyone for this fight. Yes, I would recommend you boost, this Mordo's a major pain. I recommend taking Stupefy off. That way, if you do accidentally parry Mordo, the stun timer is reduced, and you don't have to worry too much about it. Standard Mordo mechanics here. Honestly, it's really just a standard Mordo, as long as you're not using Aegon. That node is pretty much saying don't use Aegon. For Venom the Duck, he gains max persistent charges and a fully loaded RNA bank. Launching any special attacks activates all buffs stored instead of just like his typical SP3. Additionally, Venom the Duck will never activate regeneration buffs from RNA bank. The best options here are Mystic Nullify champs, looking at Doom, looking at Sim Supreme, looking at Morningstar even. Yes, I recommend you utilize boosts here. It's really going to help you punch him down. Mystic Dispersion is a absolute send here because there's so many buffs you're nullifying. Despair is optional, but it will help with the occasional regeneration that he gets. Beware his increased power. Like all champions when you're fighting him, he will have increased power gain if you aren't nullifying his buffs, and that it can be really scary. Additionally, letting him launch a special will give you access to buff nullification for Mystic Dispersion. A lot of really good power gain there. If you're using Sim Supreme, if you have Doom but no Mystic Dispersion, Doom is better. Just like if you're trying to decide between the two. But if you're using Sim Supreme, let Venom the Duck launch a special periodically, especially when outside of your L3, L2, L2 rotation, because then you're going to be able to gain access to a lot of power gain from Mystic Dispersion. It's also a relatively easy fight as long as you are good at Special 2 intercepting. But that's not a hard mechanic. You should get it down pretty fast. If you're using Doom, it's a standard Doom rotation. You could potentially do a Special 3 rotation where you never launch L1, L2, you just go only L3s. It's a long fight, but it's easy. It's brain dead. Morningstar, Special 2 all day. Howard the Duck. For Howard the Duck, he begins the fight with 30 passive indestructible effects. Critical hits and heavy attacks remove 1 charge per hit. He is better taken down with Aegon, better with crit. Void on a coin flip, that's an asterisk. I would recommend you boost here so that you get the most damage out of each revive. Precision Mastery helps, but you should have it on anyways. All champions can parry heavy at the start until the charges are removed to essentially access a damage phase on Howard the Duck. At 60 and 30%, fear the regen. Make sure you parry to prevent that from happening. But I will make a note, if you bring in Void, don't parry when he's at 60 and 30% and then just reverse heal him. It is a 50% coin flip, but you could just completely melt and cheese him. It's a really nice option there as well. For Hyperion, every 30 seconds he gains a 15-second unstoppable buff. Nullifying a buff on the defender resets this timer. You want to use Mystic Nullify / Power Control champions here. Yes, I recommend you use Boost. It's a long fight regardless. Mystic Dispersion really helps you gain that power, but otherwise this is a standard Hyperion fight. You should be nullifying buffs, so the node is relatively not applicable. Generally speaking, I liked Doom over Sim, but both of them are viable here. For the champion, every 30 seconds, literally the same node as Hyperion. For this fight, you want to use Mystic and Nullifies. I would recommend you boost because it is a lot of health here on the champion. Mystic Dispersion will help you launch specials quicker, get more damage out per revive, but otherwise this is a standard the champion fight, and you should be nullifying buffs, so the node is relatively NA. Generally speaking though, I preferred Sim over Doom here, so just kind of goes to show you got to pick your poison. For Cyclops, he always starts in Spreadsheet mode, which is essentially parry mode. That's how I'll refer to it going forward, but he has 2 modes. Parry mode, during special attacks, the attackers cannot use dex, but parries have a 100% perfect block and carry throughout the entire special, and dex mode, or overcharged mode, where special attacks are unblockable and can't miss. Additionally, Cyclops can't gain power from landing or taking hits during the fight, but he gains 1 bar of power every 10 seconds and has a high chance to launch specials. You can lose literally anyone to take him down. Yes, you should boost. It's just a punching bag. No major mastery considerations. Any champ, what you do to fight the Cyclops is you always alternate between parrying his special 1 and dexing his special 1. So learn to do both. He launches it very quickly. So when he gets that bar of power, immediately start baiting specials and get ready. If you're using a skill champion, you will be taking lots of block damage if you're relying on parry, so rely on intercepts, heavy cornering, or backdraft intercepts for your damage openings. If you're using Aegon, ability accuracy reduction will cause Cyclops to slowly gain power from being hit, so you will potentially need to parry or dex in L2. It's very tricky. I died pretty much every time it happened to me, so just keep that in mind. For Ghost, you can phase while Cyclops is in the parry phase, because it's not unblockable, unmissable on the parry, but for the spread shot, you still need to dex. So you just alternate phase dex instead of parry dex if you would like. A lot of people use that method. For Loki, standing near Loki constantly drains the opponent's power. If the attacker stays at 0% power for 4 seconds, they take 35% of their max HP as direct damage. Anyone can take down Loki. Yes, you should boost. He's a punching bag. No major mastery considerations. And pretty much just stay above 0% power. You're fine. For Aegon, attackers have 100% offensive, minus 100% offensive ability accuracy, except during special attacks. Let me put that note in here. Anyone can take him down. Yes, you should boost. He's a punching bag. Mystic Dispersion will really help you if you're bringing a Mystic. All champions, you should beware the block damage, because when you're punching into him, he gains Furies, and he's going to hurt if you're taking block damage, but both his Special 1 and Special 2 can be punished for combo openings, so as long as you're pretty good at intercepting and pretty good at punishing specials, not too big of a deal. If you're using a Mystic champion, punch Aegon and then stall the Furies. They will drop and you'll get big power gains from Mystic Dispersion. Just be careful if you're using a Mystic and you're trying to rely on specials for damage, because sometimes comboing into a special will cause like the 100% offensive ability accuracy reduction to affect your special. This isn't super relevant, but it's pretty relevant for like Sim Supreme or Doom even. Like you're like, oh, why didn't I get my Fury from Doom? And it's because you were comboing into him. So just dash back and then L3. It's much safer and you don't get robbed. Next up is Invisible Woman. For Invisible Woman, when the attacker / defender fills a bar of power, the attacker is inflicted with a 15-second power sting. Power stings have plus 50% ability accuracy, and unless the defender is under the effects of a debuff and the power sting expires, the attacker receives a 5-second stun debuff. Champions people use here most commonly are Nick Fury, Aegon Stealth Suit, Cull Obsidian. Yes, you should boost up. This fight is a pain. Resonance Mastery will really help you if you're not utilizing Nick Fury. This is a standard Invisible Woman fight, but you really need to break the shield to do damage because her health pool is massive, so 10% of her health pool on a shield is huge. If you're using Nick Fury, once you're in the real Nick phase, use 2 special 1s to go unblockable. Honestly, just tank the power sting damage. It's only about 3% health per, and it's worth taking the damage to secure an easier fight. After that, standard Nick fight. You know, heavy when she's got the shield up to place the deep bleed, and then just light combo end into her. Make sure you dex her specials, or honestly even block them. Easy fight. It'll be like 2 revives. And if you're not using Nick, the Resonance Mastery can really help you, because it will keep a weakness debuff on Invisible Woman, and you don't have to worry about being stunned from the power stings. And then from there, it's just a standard punching bag Invisible Woman. For Cull Obsidian, he has a node where his persistent charges are set to max at the start of the fight. Additionally, he has plus 500% buff duration and buff potency for his personal buffs, but he loses 1% of his max HP whenever a buff is nullified. So essentially, bring a Mystic Nullifier here. No, you don't need to boost. All your damage is coming from nullifications. Mystic Dispersion is optional. You don't really need it, but it's nice to have, especially if you're using like Sim Supreme or Morningstar. It's really nice to have for those two. Essentially, let Cull Obsidian launch his special 1. This will give him 10 combo shield buffs, and then you nullify those. Free damage. It's a great time. If you're using Sim Supreme, you SP3 to nullify all 10 buffs, push Cull to an L1. bait the L1, repeat. Doom, you just spam L1. It's great. And then Collector, Unit Man. I will not be doing a breakdown on Collector. If I do it, it'll be a separate video. But that said, hopefully this helps some of you out. Paths 2 through 5 coming up at a later date. As always, I'll talk to you all later. Peace.